You think you know American history? Think again. The picturesque, rolling hills of western Pennsylvania are hiding a secret so disturbing. It's been scrubbed from every official record. I'm talking about a collection of church relics that no historian can properly trace. Bones and preserved flesh, tucked inside ornate reliquaries across 17 different congregations. What if I told you that from 1745 to 1792, 73 people vanished from these communities? Devout men, women, and, most chillingly, orphan children, all later declared saints. The official story is a pious lie, but a sealed manuscript, buried deep in the Philadelphia Historical Society, tells the horrifying truth. It contains the sworn testimonies of 3 witnesses who stumbled upon a secret so dark it could shatter faith itself: the Witmore family workshop. For nearly 5 decades, this family was transforming human bodies into holy relics. The churches involved successfully kept this manuscript locked away for centuries, but through my own research, I've unearthed the truth they so desperately tried to hide. Before we get into the grim details of the Witmore family's enterprise, if you're brave enough to hear historical horrors few dare to reveal, hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments what state you're listening from. Who knows? Your local church might hold secrets you never imagined. In the mid-18th century, Pennsylvania was a unique religious melting pot. While Philadelphia was dominated by the Quakers, the western frontier was a mosaic of Presbyterians, Lutherans, and smaller Christian sections. They pushed into lands claimed from native peoples, building humble wooden churches as they went. It was into this volatile landscape that the Witmore family arrived in 1742. They settled in Chester County, about 30 miles west of Philadelphia, on a plot of land where rolling hills gave way to dense, unforgiving forest. The family patriarch, Nathaniel Witmore, was a stern man with penetrating gray eyes. He presented himself as a skilled craftsman of religious artifacts, chalices, communion plates, and ornate Bible covers that quickly earned him a reputation among wealthy congregations. His workshop, a 2-story timber structure, sat on 12 acres of secluded woodland. Inside, large windows bathed the main floor in natural light, a seemingly peaceful setting where he would receive ministers and church elders. His wife, Elizabeth, was a slender woman with delicate hands and an almost unnerving ability to maintain a perfectly placid expression. No matter the circumstance, Elizabeth, Nathaniel's wife, ran their household and managed their 4 children with a chilling precision. Neighbors found her admirable, if a bit cold. The family were pillars of the community, attending the Harmony Meeting House, where they impressed the Quaker congregation with their apparent spiritual depth. Their eldest son, Thomas, worked with his father, while their daughters, Mary and Sarah, helped their mother. But it was their youngest, William, who held an unsettling intensity in his gaze. He'd spend hours alone in the woods, returning with meticulously preserved plants and small animal specimens. His parents called it a scientific pursuit. I call it a prelude to something far more sinister. Chester County was a place of both harsh realities and religious fervor. The Great Awakening had swept through, creating fierce competition between denominations. Churches wanted to distinguish themselves, not just with doctrine, but with the quality of their artifacts. This was Nathaniel Witmore's moment. His craftsmanship was so exceptional that by 1745, his workshop had expanded to include 2 apprentices, Jacob Miller and Peter Collins. The Witmores lived comfortably, their piety and industriousness serving as the perfect mask for what truly happened behind the workshop's closed doors after sunset. The first domino fell in the autumn of 1745. Mary Collins, a devout Quaker known for her healing work, disappeared while traveling home. In colonial times, such disappearances were often dismissed as the work of Indians or wild animals. But Mary Collins wasn't a victim of the wilderness. She was the first of many. On November 17, 1745, an early winter storm was closing in on Chester County. The sky was dark and the wind whipped brittle leaves across the frozen ground. Mary, a 43-year-old widow with hands weathered from a lifetime of charity, pulled her woolen cloak tighter and quickened her pace as she passed the lantern light spilling from the Witmore workshop. She had no idea she was walking to her doom. According to the sealed manuscript, the one I found, This was the moment Thomas Witmore's testimony begins. He saw her pass, a fleeting shadow against the growing storm, and in that moment, the true horror of their family enterprise was about to begin. In a shaky confession, written years later and discovered in the wall of a Philadelphia prison cell, Thomas Witmore finally revealed the horrifying truth. "My father had been watching Mary Collins for weeks," he wrote. "Her reputation for saintliness would make her perfect." Nathaniel convinced his family they were doing God's work, a great purpose revealed to him to bring true holiness to the colonies through sacred vessels. As Mary passed our property, Nathaniel emerged from the trees, lantern in hand. With a voice laced with practiced desperation, he called out, claiming our son, William, had wandered into the woods. Mary, known for her kindness, didn't hesitate. She followed him deep into our property, toward the workshop's hidden rear entrance. "I watched from the window," Thomas wrote. "My mother had already prepared the back room, covering the floor with canvas cloths. I was 16. I believed them when they spoke of creating sacred relics, thinking it meant crafting representations." The rest of his confession became an illegible scrawl, as if his hand trembled too violently to write the gruesome details. What happened in that back room remains mercifully unsaid, but the aftermath was described with disturbing precision. For the next 3 days, Mary Collins's body was methodically processed. Nathaniel, who had studied preservation techniques from medical texts from England, taught his eldest son how to treat human tissue with a mixture of salt, herbs, and other substances to prevent decay. Meanwhile, my mother sewed small black velvet pouches, each embroidered with golden religious symbols. "We were doing God's work," Thomas wrote. He said the Protestant churches of America lacked the sacred relics that gave the Catholic Church its power, and that we would provide what was needed to elevate true worship in the colonies. "I believed him then. God forgive me, I believed him." 2 weeks after Mary Collins disappeared, Nathaniel Witmore traveled to Philadelphia with a collection of his ornate wooden boxes. He returned with more commissions and money than ever before. At the next Quaker meeting, he spoke movingly about the loss of their dear friend Mary and suggested a memorial service. During the service, he presented the meeting house with an exquisitely crafted altar box. What the congregation didn't know was that, sealed within a hidden compartment of that box, was a small piece of Mary Collins herself. The first of what would become hundreds of sacred relics distributed throughout the colonies over the following decades. The winter of 1745 gave way to spring, but with the thaw came whispers from Philadelphia. Whispers of a miracle. A small Episcopal church was claiming that a holy relic, a fragment of bone from an unknown 18th century saint, had miraculously healed 3 parishioners. When pressed, the rector admitted the bone had been acquired from a European dealer through a local craftsman. That craftsman, of course, was Nathaniel Witmore. By 1750, our family business had exploded. The workshop doubled in size, now employing 5 apprentices. But none of them were allowed into the secret cellar rooms beneath the workshop, where the true business took place. Our new home, a substantial 2-story house of stone and timber, stood as a monument to our growing wealth. The disappearance of Mary Collins had long faded from local memory, replaced by other vanishing acts. A visiting preacher, a devout elderly woman. Always individuals without strong family ties, their absences easily explained by the dangers of colonial life. But something had changed. My mother, Elizabeth, had developed a chilling new method. The discernment, my sister Sarah wrote in her journal. Elizabeth claimed God spoke to her, revealing which souls were destined for sainthood after death. This monstrous rationalization allowed them to see their actions not as murder, but as a divine calling. They were simply helping these chosen individuals achieve their heavenly purpose sooner than nature intended. Meanwhile, Nathaniel was expanding his network, cultivating relationships with church leaders across Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and even Virginia. Father told them that the Catholic Church in Europe had hoarded sacred power for centuries. Thomas's confession explained. He convinced these ambitious Protestant ministers that acquiring relics discreetly would bring the same power to their congregations without embracing Catholic doctrine. The argument was a masterstroke, and the money flowed in. Our family operation grew to include a network of unwitting collaborators, people who would report back on the miracles occurring in churches that possessed our relics. These testimonials were then used to create more demand, a horrifying feedback loop of faith and human remains. We were not just selling objects. We were selling hope, salvation, and the promise of divine intervention, all built on a foundation of bone and blood. The Witmores instructed church leaders to keep their relics secret from the general congregation, a strategy that limited exposure while enhancing the object's perceived value. What their customers didn't know was that these ancient saints' relics were created in our cellar from the bodies of their own neighbors. In the spring of 1753, a physician named Dr. Samuel Winters began asking uncomfortable questions. He examined a healing relic at a patient's request and found that the tissue couldn't possibly be as old as claimed. The preservation methods were wrong. Before he could investigate further, Dr. Winters disappeared while traveling, his body never found. The next month, a small wooden case containing a 12th-century healer's finger bone appeared in a New York church. The years passed, and the grotesque pattern continued. The Witmore children grew into the family business with unsettling ease. Thomas became his father's primary assistant. William, the youngest and most disturbing sibling, developed a particular talent for the preservation process, experimenting with techniques to create more convincing relics. The daughters, Mary and Sarah, managed the financial aspects, maintaining the family's respectable facade while laundering their considerable profits. As the American colonies moved toward revolution, new opportunities arose for us. The disruption of trade with England created a shortage of religious items, making our workshop one of the few reliable sources. We were careful to appear patriotic without taking a side, a neutrality that allowed our trade to continue regardless of which faction controlled our territory. As the Revolutionary War neared its conclusion, a new and particularly profitable market for our gruesome products emerged. The year was 1781. While the colonies celebrated their impending independence, the end of the war brought a new spiritual revival. The churches, many of them damaged during the conflict, were being rebuilt, and communities were searching for meaning after years of war. We were ready to supply them. This spiritual revival created an unprecedented demand for religious artifacts, and my family saw a monstrous new opportunity. In February of 1782, the first orphan child disappeared from a Philadelphia church-run asylum. His name was Joseph Miller, a 10-year-old with solemn eyes and a reputation for piety. His disappearance was briefly investigated, then dismissed as a common runaway. Just 3 months later, the Church of St. Michael in eastern Pennsylvania reported a series of miraculous events centered on a newly acquired relic, the preserved heart of a child martyr from the early church. Word of these miracles spread, and demand for similar powerful relics exploded. William suggested the children. My sister Sarah's journal revealed. Her handwriting was shaky, the ink blotched with tears. He said their innocence made them more powerful vessels for divine work. My father hesitated, but the potential prophet convinced him. God help me, she wrote. I knew it was wrong, yet I said nothing. This was the most disturbing phase of our operation. Between 1782 and 1785, at least 16 children, all orphans or from destitute families, vanished. Each disappearance created a brief stir before being attributed to the usual suspects: wilderness dangers, child traffickers, or simply the harsh realities of life for the unprotected. During this time, the market for child saint relics flourished, commanding prices 5 times higher than adult relics. We grew wealthier than ever, investing our blood money in land and political connections that insulated us from suspicion. However, the increased scale of our operation required more hands, forcing us to partially initiate 2 trusted apprentices into our secrets. One of these men was Daniel Foster, a man who would eventually become central to our downfall. In the autumn of 1785, a Quaker minister named Elijah Thompson was appointed to investigate troubling reports of Catholic-like practices involving relics and saint worship in outlying communities. Thompson was a methodical man with a background in law and a reputation for untangling complex disputes with unwavering principle. I was tasked with examining the troubling reports, his own journal explained. that had infiltrated our communities. Now the stage is set for the final act. We had built an empire on a foundation of bone and deceit, but a man of law and faith was coming to tear it down. The Witmore family's horrific enterprise was about to meet its end. Such idolatry runs counter to our belief in direct communion with the divine, Minister Elijah Thompson wrote in his journal. He was tasked with investigating Catholic-like practices that had infiltrated even our plain Quaker meetings. Thompson, a man of methodical principle with a background in law, quickly noticed a pattern. Many of the relics were acquired through a network of intermediaries who all traced back to one man, Nathaniel Witmore. The relic's provenance was elaborate, but his legal training told him it was all fabricated. In December 1785, Thompson came to Chester County to confront Nathaniel Witmore. Witmore received me graciously, Thompson's journal recounts. He showed me his public workshop and spoke at length about his connections to European suppliers. He even provided documentation that, while impressive to look at, contained inconsistencies my legal training could not overlook. Thompson left the meeting troubled, but without concrete evidence. He continued his investigation, interviewing church leaders and cataloging the miracles attributed to the Witmore relics. A disturbing pattern emerged. The most dramatic healings were always witnessed by individuals with a tenuous connection to our family. I began to suspect a deliberate scheme to manufacture not only the relics themselves, but the miracles attributed to them, Thompson wrote. He tracked the movements of these witnesses and found that their travels formed a web with our property at its center. As his investigation intensified, strange occurrences began to plague him. Items went missing from his lodgings, correspondence failed to reach its recipients, and evidence disappeared from his locked trunk. In February 1786, the night before he was to present his findings, Thompson became violently ill after a dinner. Physicians diagnosed poisoning. He survived, but was weakened for months, forcing a temporary halt to his investigation. During his convalescence, a new character entered the narrative, one who would ultimately help expose T.H. Daniel Foster, an apprentice who had been partially initiated into our family's secrets, began experiencing unbearable attacks of conscience. After witnessing the processing of a child's body, a 12-year-old orphan girl, he fled in the middle of the night, taking with him a secret journal detailing our gruesome activities. Foster made his way to Philadelphia and, after weeks of gathering courage, approached Elijah Thompson. The Quaker minister, still recovering from his poisoning, listened in horror. The young man shook violently as he spoke, Thompson recorded in his journal. Foster described a cellar chamber beneath our workshop where bodies were suspended from hooks like butchered animals. He spoke of specialized tools and preservation techniques using salt, alcohol, and herbs that kept human tissue unerringly lifelike for months or even years. Most disturbing was Foster's description of our family's demeanor: calm, methodical, and even reverent. We would lead prayers before and after these processing sessions, thanking God for choosing these vessels for his divine purpose. Armed with Foster's testimony and journal, Thompson was finally ready to act. But before he could present this evidence to authorities, a devastating fire destroyed his Philadelphia residence, claiming all of Foster's documentation. The apprentice himself vanished the next day. His fate was sealed when partial remains were discovered in the Delaware River. Undeterred, Thompson continued his investigation with even greater caution. He stopped keeping written records and instead developed an elaborate system of coded messages and multiple informants. By late 1786, he had connected at least 27 disappearances to our operation and identified 9 churches that unknowingly housed human remains disguised as relics. What he still lacked was the physical evidence needed to convince skeptical authorities to move against a family with powerful connections. The opportunity to obtain that evidence came from an unexpected source: my sister, Sarah Witmore. The winter of 1787 brought heavy snows that isolated our compound for weeks, forcing us into close quarters. During this period of forced confinement, the tensions that had been simmering beneath our family's placid facade finally reached a boiling point at the true horror of our family business. The noose was tightening. During a winter of unusually heavy snow, the fractures in the Witmore family deepened. My sister, Sarah, had kept a journal for years, but now the psychological weight of our complicity was crushing her. "I can no longer sleep without seeing their faces," she wrote in December 1787. "The children especially haunt me." She was 32, unmarried, and trapped, as our father had discouraged any suitors who might have taken her away from the family business. William had become something inhuman in his enthusiasms, pushing for more and more production. He even spoke of preserving entire limbs to sell as intact relics. My mother encouraged him, quoting scripture about the sanctification of holy vessels. I could barely bear to witness it. At 27, William had taken over much of the operation as our father's health failed. He refined our preservation techniques, allowing for more convincing relics and higher prices. To meet his demands, he began targeting remote frontier settlements where disappearances would attract less attention. In January 1788, two key events sealed our family's fate. First, William returned from a trip with 3 new subjects, children from a remote settlement devastated by illness. The rapid processing of these victims overwhelmed our system, forcing us to store partially preserved remains in the workshop cellar for longer than usual. Second, and more importantly, Sarah made a fateful decision. During a solo trip to Philadelphia, she sought out Elijah Thompson. Their meeting, held in the back room of a Quaker bookshop, lasted over 3 hours. Thompson's coded notes, later deciphered, recorded Sarah's revelations. Female W provided confirmation of all suspicions and worse beyond imagining. He wrote, "Family operation more extensive than previously documented. Estimates 70+ adult victims, 20+ children since beginning. Detailed processing methods and distribution network. Names of participating church officials." She also revealed the most damning secret of all: an underground chamber beneath the workshop containing remains in various stages of processing, along with archived samples of every single victim. The truth was about to come out. Sarah provided Thompson with what he needed: a hand-drawn map of our workshop, detailing the hidden entrance to the underground chamber, and the location of my mother's ledger, a meticulous record of every victim and every relic. "I know I condemn myself by revealing these things," she reportedly told Thompson. "I expect no mercy in this world or the next, but the children's faces give me no peace." Thompson, recognizing both the value and risk of her information, arranged for her to stay with trusted Quaker contacts. This decision, while well-intentioned, sealed our fate. When Sarah didn't return, William immediately suspected betrayal. My father, weakened by his illness, muttered prayers about Judas. My mother, ever calm, methodically listed the vulnerabilities Sarah's absence created and the evidence that needed to be eliminated. I argued for us to flee, but William would not hear of surrendering the business he viewed as his birthright. We decided on a 2-pronged strategy. William would track Sarah to eliminate the threat, while my mother would oversee the relocation of our most incriminating materials to a secondary location, an abandoned mine shaft. What we didn't know was that Thompson had already assembled a coalition of authorities. Recognizing that local officials might be our allies, he had engaged influential members of the Philadelphia Yearly Meeting, who in turn contacted trusted members of the new state government. By February 12, 1788, a raid on our compound was planned. But a snowstorm descended upon Chester County, hampering travel and communication. Fearing a delay would give us time to destroy evidence, Thompson made a fateful decision. He would proceed with a smaller force. He departed Philadelphia with 6 armed men, including 2 constables and 4 Quaker volunteers, all committed to ending our atrocities. What followed was known by multiple sources as the Night of Unholy Discovery, an encounter with a horror so profound it would become a whispered legend for generations. Thompson and his small party of 6 men reached the Witmore property on the night of February 13, 1788. A howling snowstorm masked their approach, but also their ability to hear any activity inside the buildings. The workshop windows glowed with light, an ominous sign that their arrival might not be unexpected. The raid on the Witmore compound. They approached the workshop and Thompson knocked firmly, announcing official business. The door was opened by Thomas Witmore, who showed no surprise at their presence. With unsettling calm, He stepped aside and invited them in. James Pearson, one of the Quaker volunteers, sensed immediately that something was wrong. Thomas's demeanor suggested prepared resignation, not panic. Inside, the workshop appeared normal, but Constable William Bradford's attention was drawn to a large cabinet against the far wall. Inside, he found a black velvet pouch containing a preserved human finger. At this discovery, Thomas's composure broke. He sank to his knees, muttering prayers and confessions. He revealed that his father was ill in the main house, while his mother and brother, William, had departed hours earlier with large trunks, heading toward the western edge of the property. The unholy discovery. Thompson immediately sent 2 men to intercept Elizabeth and William, while he and the others pressed Thomas for the entrance to the underground chamber. Thomas, in his confession, revealed a hidden switch that opened a false wall behind a large workbench. A set of steep, narrow stairs led down into a cellar. The men descended into the dark, damp chamber, which was lit by a single lantern. The air was thick with the stench of death and decay. Pearson described the scene in his sealed account. Bodies, some of them children, were suspended from hooks like butchered animals. The floor was stained with blood, and specialized tools for dismemberment lay on a table. Along one wall were shelves filled with jars of preserved organs and body parts. Another shelf was lined with small black velvet pouches, each one embroidered with a religious symbol and a name. This chilling discovery confirmed every one of Sarah's and Daniel Foster's claims. It was a scene of such depravity that it would haunt all who witnessed it for the remainder of their lives. Upon their arrival at the Witmore compound, Thompson and his men discovered the workshop doors unlocked. Inside, they found Thomas Witmore, who, with an eerie calm, revealed the location of a hidden trapdoor. The miasma of chemical preservatives and human decay that rose from the opening was a physical blow, and the men knew they were descending into something truly horrifying. The underground horror. The team, led by Thomas, found a series of rooms carved from the earth. The first room was a morbid workshop, complete with surgical instruments and notebooks containing detailed procedures for human dissection and preservation. One volume held drawings of human anatomy with specific sections highlighted and annotated with preservation instructions. The horror deepened in the adjacent room. 3 bodies, 2 adults and 1 child, hung suspended from iron hooks, partially dissected and treated with preservatives. The exposed tissue had an unnatural, waxy appearance. The most disturbing discovery was the 3rd chamber, which Thomas called the archive. Floor-to-ceiling shelves held hundreds of small wooden boxes, each meticulously labeled with a name and date. Inside, they found preserved human fragments, pieces of bone, skin, or tissue samples, a horrifying catalog of all the saints the family had created. At the center of this room lay Elizabeth Witmore's ledger, a massive volume documenting in cold, commercial terms every victim, every relic, and every transaction. The ledger revealed the full scale of the operation. 79 adults and 22 children had been processed since 1745. The family had supplied relics to over 40 churches across 7 states. The final reckoning. As the raid was concluding, the 2 men sent to intercept Elizabeth and William returned, empty-handed. They had found the abandoned mine shaft, but it was empty. Elizabeth and William had vanished, taking with them any evidence of their escape. Nathaniel Witmore was taken into custody, but he died of his illness shortly after. Thomas was imprisoned but later died of a wasting disease, his confessions sealed in a prison cell wall. Elizabeth and William were never found, their fates unknown. The discovery sent shockwaves through the colonies. The churches that had unwittingly housed the relics were forced to confront a monstrous truth. Most kept the existence of the relics a secret, fearing the damage to their congregations. But for those who knew the truth, a chilling question remained. How many other communities held similar secrets, hidden in plain sight? The legacy of the Witmore family was not just one of death and desecration, but one of a faith betrayed, a history rewritten, and a darkness that continued to linger in the quiet corners of a new nation. The chilling confession. Mother had the discernment. She could sense those whose bodies would produce the most powerful relics. The truly devout, the innocence. This was Thomas Witmore's chilling confession to investigators. He further revealed that his mother, Elizabeth, had taught his brother, William, to identify potential victims by watching them at church gatherings and revival meetings. The final encounter. As dawn broke, the two men sent to intercept Elizabeth and William returned. One was seriously injured with a knife wound. He reported that they found the Witmores at an abandoned mine shaft, transferring boxes into the entrance. When confronted, Elizabeth offered money for their silence, while William fought like one possessed, killing one of the men and gravely injuring the other before they fled into the forest. A broader manhunt was organized, and 3 days later, Elizabeth and William's bodies were found in a small hunting cabin. They had consumed poison after apparently performing a ritual. Notes at the scene suggested they believed their deaths would consecrate the remaining relics they had salvaged. The aftermath. Nathaniel Witmore, too ill to have participated in the escape, was taken into custody and died shortly after. Thomas Witmore was tried in Philadelphia in April 1788 and hanged on May 7, 1788, after providing a complete confession that corroborated the evidence. The most challenging question authorities faced was how to handle the hundreds of human remains that had been distributed as relics. After lengthy deliberation involving government officials and church leaders, a decision was made to silence the entire matter. The records and confessions were sealed in the Philadelphia Historical Society, and the churches were instructed to quietly dispose of the relics. They were told to bury them in consecrated ground and to never speak of the matter again. This final act of concealment ensured the truth of the Witmore family's horrific crimes would remain hidden for centuries. The aftermath of the Witmore family's horrific enterprise presented unprecedented challenges for the new nation's civil and religious authorities. The truth threatened to undermine public faith at a time when such faith was considered essential to the new nation's moral foundation. After much deliberation, a decision was reached. This dark chapter would be deliberately forgotten. We determined that the faithful should be protected from knowledge that might devastate their spiritual foundations, wrote Judge William Bradford in a sealed memorandum. All records of this investigation shall be sealed for a period not less than 100 years, and officials involved are bound to silence by oath. The churches that had purchased the relics were privately informed of their true nature and given the option to have the human remains quietly collected for proper Christian burial. But what the authorities could not have anticipated was how many church leaders chose a third, far darker option. Of the 43 churches identified in Elizabeth Witmore's ledger, at least 17 chose to retain the human remains, continuing to present them as authentic relics while knowing their true origins. The justification was disturbing in its pragmatism. Some clergy argued that since miracles had occurred regardless of the relic's provenance, God had indeed sanctified these poor victims. Others spoke more practically of the increased donations, attendance, and prestige their churches had gained. To surrender these advantages, they argued, would harm their congregations more than continuing the deception. Elijah Thompson, a man of unwavering moral principle, found this reasoning abhorrent. His final efforts focused on creating a confidential registry of every Witmore victim, along with the location of their remains, intending to ensure these individuals would not be forgotten. Thompson created a confidential registry to ensure that every victim whose identity could be established was not completely erased from history. This document was included in the sealed records with instructions for proper memorialization when the truth could finally be acknowledged. The aftermath and legacy. The Witmore property was burned to the ground, officially recorded as an accidental fire, though many believe it was deliberately set by local authorities to eliminate evidence. The land was later sold to families who were oblivious to its dark history. Sarah Witmore, whose courage had exposed her family's crimes, was given a new identity and relocated to Boston. She lived under Quaker protection until her death in 1823. Her journal, a testament to her guilt and determination, revealed a woman haunted by her past, yet dedicated to charitable works, especially those benefiting orphan children. In her final entry, she wrote, "I go to my judgment with no expectation of mercy, only the hope that those we harmed have found the peace we stole from them." The haunting of history. The physical evidence, the surgical tools, preservation formulas, and workshop apparatus was supposedly destroyed. However, Rumors persisted for decades that some items were secretly preserved by medical schools and private collectors. William Witmore's techniques for maintaining the lifelike appearance and flexibility of human tissue were of particular interest to early medical researchers, with oblique references appearing in early 19th century medical texts. The Witmore family's story might have remained buried forever if not for a courthouse fire in Philadelphia in 1879. Water damage led to the accidental unsealing of records from the 1788 case. A clerk discovered portions of Thomas Witmore's confession, and rumors quickly circulated, eventually reaching a reporter for the Philadelphia Inquirer. The resulting sensationalized article, published on November 17, 1879, exactly 134 years after Mary Collins became the family's first victim, brought the basic outline of the Witmore crimes into the public eye for the first time. The truth had finally begun to emerge from the darkness. After its publication on November 17, 1879, the sensationalized newspaper article about the Witmore crimes was quickly denounced as lurid fiction by religious leaders and eventually retracted under pressure. Without access to the sealed records, the reporter could not substantiate his claims. By this time, most of the churches that had knowingly retained Witmore relics had either disposed of them or incorporated them so completely that their origins were forgotten. The unearthing of the truth. The story might have been lost to history forever if not for a discovery in 1923. During renovations to the Pennsylvania Historical Society building, workers found a hidden compartment behind a bookshelf containing the complete sealed records of the Witmore case. The Society's director made the controversial decision to preserve the documents while maintaining their confidentiality, cataloging them under an innocuous title and restricting them to qualified researchers. Through this carefully controlled access, historians began to piece together the true scope of the Witmore family's operation. The most disturbing aspect of these later investigations was the confirmation that human remains processed by the Witmores continued to exist in church collections well into the 20th century, with some possibly remaining to this day. A discreet survey conducted in 1967 identified 11 churches across the eastern United States that still possessed objects matching the descriptions in the Witmore ledger. When approached with the evidence, current church leaders reacted with horror, denial, and outright refusal to investigate further. A lingering darkness. The Harmony Meeting House, where the Witmores once worshipped, still stands. Though repurposed and eventually abandoned, local residents report an unusual reluctance to approach the building after dark, with many claiming to experience a profound sense of unease when passing the property. Whether this is due to local legends or something more difficult to explain remains a matter of perspective. Perhaps the most disturbing legacy of the Witmore family lies not in the physical remnants of their crimes but in the chilling question that lingers. How many churches, even today, unknowingly house these gruesome relics, their true nature hidden in plain sight? The legacy of the Witmore family extends far beyond the physical remains of their victims. It lies in the profound psychological impact of their deception. The fact that objects believed to channel divine power were actually products of serial murder creates a deep cognitive dissonance. This raises uncomfortable questions about faith, the power of belief, and the human capacity for self-deception to achieve a desired outcome. The troubling reality of miracles. The Witmore case forces us to confront a troubling reality. Miracles attributed to the fraudulent relics were reported by seemingly reliable witnesses. Contemporary accounts describe healings, visions, and other phenomena experienced by individuals with no connection to the Witmore conspiracy and no apparent motive to lie. This leads to a fascinating philosophical question. Were these events merely the power of suggestion and coincidence, or can sincere belief create its own reality, regardless of an object's true nature? Unearthing the past. In 1992, ground-penetrating radar on the former Witmore property revealed anomalies consistent with underground chambers and a filled-in mine shaft. Limited archaeological investigation confirmed the existence of structures matching historical descriptions. However, no human remains were recovered, and the landowners, disturbed by the findings, refused further excavation. The site was reburied and marked as historically significant but not open to the public. The last verified Witmore relic was removed from a small Lutheran church in western Pennsylvania in 2005. During a renovation, a hidden compartment behind the altar was discovered, containing a velvet pouch and a letter from 1788. The church pastor arranged for DNA testing, which confirmed the remains were human tissue. The remains were given a proper burial with a simple marker reading, "Unknown child of God finally at rest. The haunting of the land." The Witmore family home property changed hands multiple times. The area where the workshop once stood remained undeveloped as successive owners reported that crops failed and livestock refused to graze there. Local legend holds that on certain autumn nights, particularly around November 17th, the anniversary of the family's first crime, the faint outline of the workshop can be seen glowing in the darkness, a haunting reminder of the horrors that once occurred there. If this dark tale of religious exploitation and murder has sent chills down your spine, share it with someone who appreciates historical horror. Support our exploration of America's hidden terrors by liking this video and subscribing to our channel. What sinister secrets might be hiding in your community's history? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Ghost, the power of history's narrative. The most enduring legacy of the Witmore case is the questions it raises about how history is constructed and maintained. The deliberate suppression of this story by both governmental and religious authorities shows how uncomfortable truths can be systematically erased from public memory when they threaten established institutions or cherished beliefs. What we know as history is often a version of events that powerful interests have allowed to survive, not the complete truth. For the Witmore family's victims, the devout men, women, and especially the children, the greatest injustice is not just their murder, but the erasure of their stories. They died twice, first at the hands of their killers, and again when their identities were obscured to protect institutional reputations. A fragmented truth. As we conclude this dark chapter, we should remember that somewhere in eastern Pennsylvania, unmarked graves hold the partial remains of those who became unwitting saints through the Witmore's enterprise. Other fragments of these individuals may still rest in church reliquaries, venerated by the faithful who are unaware of their true origins. The physical separation of these remains is a powerful metaphor for how history itself becomes fragmented. Pieces preserved here, portions hidden there, with the complete truth never fully assembled. The next time you enter an old church and see a relic on display, perhaps you'll wonder about its true provenance. In that moment of questioning, you pay tribute to those whose stories were nearly lost to history's deliberate forgetting. By remembering the Witmore family's victims, we assert that no institutional reputation is more valuable than the truth, no matter how disturbing. This mystery shows us the darkest aspects of human nature disguised as spiritual devotion. What do you think of this story? Do you believe everything was revealed? Or are there still church relics hiding dark secrets? Leave your comment below. If you enjoyed this tale and want more horror stories like this, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and share it with someone who loves mysteries.